Have you ever wondered if the person sleeping next to you every night could secretly be planning to destroy everything you've worked for? What if I told you that the husband I trusted with my life, my business, and my $500 million fortune was quietly meeting with divorce attorneys for months, planning to take half of everything I built from scratch? This isn't just another breakup story. This is about the moment I realized that trust without verification can cost you everything, and how I turned the tables in just 7 days using methods so ruthless they would make a corporate raider blush. Before we dive into this psychological thriller that destroyed my marriage but saved my empire, smash that subscribe button, because what you're about to hear will fundamentally change how you view trust, power, and protection in relationships. The elite don't want you to know these strategies, but I'm about to expose every single one of them. In the next few minutes, I'm going to share exactly how I discovered my husband's betrayal through methods that would make private investigators jealous, the specific red flags I missed that could have saved me months of psychological torture, and the precise legal warfare tactics I used to protect every single dollar of my wealth. If you're an entrepreneur, if you're in a relationship where significant assets are involved, or if you've ever felt that gut instinct that something isn't right with someone you love, this story will give you the tools and predatory mindset to protect yourself before it's too late. Are you currently in a relationship where you've built something valuable together? Do you sometimes notice secretive behavior, but tell yourself you're just being paranoid? Have you ever wondered what would happen to your business or assets if your partner decided to leave and destroy you in the process? By the end of this video, you'll know exactly what warning signs to watch for, how to legally weaponize your assets without destroying trust, and why the decisions I made in one crucial week saved me from losing everything I'd worked 20 years to build. Drop a comment right now if you've ever felt like someone close to you might be playing a longer game than you realized. I never thought I'd be the type of person to tell a story like this, but here I am, sitting in my new penthouse overlooking San Francisco Bay, realizing that sometimes the most dangerous predators come from the people we trust the most. My name is Sarah, and 18 months ago, I was living what I thought was the perfect life. I had just taken my tech company public, bringing my personal net worth to over $500 million. My husband Marcus and I had been together for 12 years, married for 8, and from the outside, we were Silicon Valley's golden couple. I was the brilliant CEO who had transformed a small software startup into a billion-dollar enterprise, and he was the supportive husband who had been there since the beginning, cheering me on through every late night, every product launch, every investor meeting that would shape our future. But here's what I didn't know. While I was building an empire, he was studying it like a predator studies prey, learning every weakness, every entry point, every way to tear it down from the inside. The man sharing my bed was conducting reconnaissance on my life, and I was too blinded by love to see that I had married my own destruction. Our daily routine was clockwork precision, but what I thought was domestic harmony was actually strategic surveillance. Every morning at 5 a.m., I'd wake up in our Palo Alto mansion, review market reports and international news while sipping my coffee, kiss Marcus goodbye as he headed to his consulting job, and drive my Tesla to the gleaming headquarters where 2,000 employees depended on the decisions I made every day. Our life was structured, predictable, and what I believed to be completely secure. We shared everything: bank accounts, investment portfolios, real estate holdings, even access to my company's financial information, since Marcus had been involved in the early strategic planning. I trusted him with every detail of our financial empire because he wasn't just my husband. He was my partner in building this dream from nothing more than an idea I had while working 80-hour weeks at a startup that eventually failed. The irony wasn't lost on me that I could analyze market trends, predict consumer behavior, and make million-dollar decisions with confidence, yet I was completely blind to the psychological warfare being conducted in my own home. I prided myself on being strategic, on thinking 3 steps ahead in business, on having contingency plans for every scenario. But when it came to my marriage, I operated on pure trust, which in hindsight was like walking into a financial battlefield completely unarmed. Marcus knew every password, every investment strategy, every business partnership, every weak point in our financial structure. He had been there when I was vulnerable, when I was building something from nothing, and he had earned that access through years of calculated support and shared dreams that were apparently only shared by one of us. Looking back now, I realize that this complete transparency, this total trust, had created the perfect storm for what was about to happen. I had essentially given a potential enemy complete intelligence on how to destroy everything I cared about. And I had done it willingly, lovingly, with no idea that trust without verification is just another word for stupidity when millions of dollars are at stake. The first crack in my perfect world appeared on a Tuesday morning in March, though I didn't recognize it as a psychological attack at the time. I was reviewing quarterly reports when I noticed Marcus had been unusually secretive with his phone. Not just protective, but secretive in a way that suggested deliberate concealment rather than privacy. He would step outside to take calls, something he'd never done before. And when I asked who had called, his answers were vague and dismissive, with a new edge I hadn't heard in 12 years together. "Just work stuff," he'd say, or "an old friend from college." But the frequency of these mysterious calls was increasing exponentially, and I began to notice he'd quickly close his laptop or minimize windows whenever I entered his home office, moving with the practiced efficiency of someone who had rehearsed these actions. For someone who had never been secretive about anything in over a decade together, these small changes felt seismic, though I kept telling myself I was reading too much into normal behavior. But my business instincts were screaming that something fundamental had shifted in the power dynamics of our relationship, and those instincts had made me $500 million by recognizing patterns that others missed. The second red flag came during a dinner party with our financial advisor, David, who had been managing our investments for 6 years and knew our financial habits better than we did. As we discussed our portfolio performance and upcoming tax strategies, David casually mentioned that Marcus had scheduled several private meetings with him over the past few months, meetings I knew nothing about. "He's been asking really detailed questions about asset liquidation and the tax implications of transferring investments between accounts," David said with a laugh, clearly thinking it was Marcus being proactive about our financial planning. But something about his tone made my stomach tighten, with the same instinct that had warned me about bad business deals in the past. Marcus hadn't mentioned any interest in restructuring our investments, and we had always made financial decisions together. It was one of the foundations of our partnership that we never moved significant money without discussing it first. When I asked Marcus about it later that evening, he brushed it off with practiced casualness, saying he was just trying to understand our portfolio better so he could be more helpful in our financial planning. But the explanation felt rehearsed, like he had prepared for this exact conversation, which made me realize he was several moves ahead of me in a game I didn't even know we were playing. The third warning sign was perhaps the most psychologically disturbing because it touched on the legal foundations of our marriage, the very documents that were supposed to protect both of us. Marcus began asking seemingly casual questions about our prenuptial agreement, which we had signed 8 years earlier when my first company was valued at just $50 million, a fraction of what I was worth now. He wanted to know how assets acquired during marriage were classified, what would happen to my current company if we ever divorced, and whether the prenup covered intellectual property and future business ventures that hadn't existed when we signed it. These conversations always happened during relaxed moments, while we were watching TV, taking walks, or having weekend morning coffee, which made them seem like innocent curiosity rather than strategic intelligence gathering designed to find weaknesses in our legal protections. But the frequency and specificity of his questions created a growing sense of unease that I couldn't shake, even though I couldn't pinpoint exactly why his sudden interest in our legal agreements felt like a threat assessment rather than marital planning. It was as if he was mapping out the legal battlefield in preparation for war, and I was helping him do it by answering his questions honestly. By April, the subtle changes in Marcus's behavior had evolved into patterns that I could no longer ignore or rationalize away, patterns that reminded me of competitive intelligence gathering I'd seen in hostile corporate takeovers. He had started carrying a second phone, claiming it was a new work device, but he guarded it more carefully than state secrets and never left it lying around as he used to do with his personal device. I noticed he was paying cash for things that he would normally put on our shared credit cards, lunch meetings, gas, even small purchases at stores we frequented together. When I asked about this shift, he explained that his company was implementing new expense reporting procedures, and it was easier to pay cash and get reimbursed later. The explanation seemed plausible on the surface, but combined with everything else, it felt like another piece of a puzzle designed to create financial opacity in a relationship that had always been built on complete transparency. He was creating parallel systems and secret channels of communication and payment, the same tactics I'd seen corporate spies use when they were preparing to steal trade secrets or sabotage operations from within. The most alarming development was Marcus's sudden interest in my daily schedule and business. Travel plans, interest that went far beyond normal spousal consideration. He would ask detailed questions about when I'd be in the office late, which days I had back-to-back meetings that would prevent me from checking personal messages, and when my next business trips were scheduled. Initially, I thought he was being considerate, perhaps planning surprises or simply wanting to coordinate our personal time better. But then I realized he seemed particularly interested in times when I would be completely unavailable and unreachable, during board meetings, international flights, or multi-day conferences where I wouldn't be monitoring personal communications. This pattern made me uncomfortable in a way I couldn't articulate at first, as if he was mapping out windows of time when he could act without my immediate awareness or interference. It reminded me of how hackers identify security vulnerabilities by studying when systems are least monitored, and the realization that my own husband might be applying similar tactics to our marriage filled me with a cold dread that kept me awake at night. The breaking point came when I accidentally overheard part of a phone conversation he was having in our garage, thinking I wasn't home. I had returned early from a meeting that had been canceled due to a client emergency, and as I entered through the side door that connected to the garage, I heard Marcus speaking in hushed but animated tones about timeline, documentation, and maximizing the settlement. The words hit me like ice water because they weren't the language of marriage. They were the vocabulary of financial warfare. The conversation ended abruptly when he heard my car door slam, and by the time I entered the house, he was casually reading a magazine in the living room as if nothing had happened. But I could see the tension in his shoulders and the way he avoided direct eye contact. That night, lying in bed next to him, I felt like I was sharing space with an enemy operative who had spent years infiltrating my life for this exact moment. The man who had supported my dreams, who had celebrated every business milestone with me, who knew my fears and insecurities better than anyone, was planning something that required secrecy, documentation, and settlements. The word settlement kept echoing in my mind, carrying implications that made my chest tight with the kind of anxiety I'd only felt during hostile takeover attempts against my company. But this was worse because the threat was coming from inside my own home, from someone who had complete access to every vulnerability I possessed. Sleep became elusive as my mind raced through every possible explanation for Marcus's behavior, but deep down, I knew there was only one scenario that connected all the dots into a coherent pattern of betrayal. I found myself lying awake at 3 a.m., staring at the ceiling, while Marcus slept peacefully beside me, wondering how long he had been planning whatever was coming, and whether every moment of tenderness in our recent past had been calculated manipulation designed to keep me compliant while he prepared to destroy me. The man who had access to every aspect of my financial life, who knew the intimate details of my business operations, who understood exactly how much everything was worth and how it was structured, was conducting secret meetings and asking questions that suggested he was preparing for a future that didn't include our partnership. It included taking everything I had built and leaving me emotionally and financially devastated. The realization was both heartbreaking and terrifying because it meant that someone I had trusted completely was potentially positioning himself to take advantage of that trust in the most devastating way possible, using the very love and transparency that I thought made our relationship strong as weapons to destroy everything I had worked for. My objective became crystal clear with the cold focus that had made me successful in business. I needed to know the truth, and I needed to know it quickly before any irreversible damage could be done to what I had spent 2 decades building. This wasn't just about my marriage anymore. It was about protecting my life's work, my employees' jobs, my family's financial security, and the legacy I wanted to leave. I couldn't make any major business decisions, couldn't plan for the future, couldn't even sleep peacefully while this uncertainty hung over. Everything I cared about like a sword waiting to fall. The not knowing was almost worse than whatever truth I might discover because it left me paralyzed, unable to act strategically or defensively while my suspected enemy continued gathering intelligence and preparing for war. I realized that I had to approach this situation like any other existential business threat. Gather superior intelligence, analyze the data without emotional contamination, understand the full scope of the risks, and develop a response strategy based on facts rather than fears or hopes. But first, I had to do something that went against every instinct I had developed over 12 years of marriage. I had to assume that the person I loved most in the world was my enemy, and I had to start thinking like a general, preparing for battle rather than a wife hoping her marriage could be saved. The first step was acknowledging that my desire to believe in Marcus's innocence was compromising my judgment and potentially putting everything at risk, the same way emotional attachment to failing investments could destroy an entire portfolio. I had to accept that the person I loved most in the world might be planning to betray me in the most calculated way possible, using the very trust and transparency that I had believed made our relationship unbreakable as intelligence for financial warfare. This meant I needed to start thinking like a CEO, protecting her company from hostile takeover rather than a wife hoping her marriage was solid. I decided to conduct my own covert investigation, carefully and quietly, using methods that would make military intelligence proud, to determine exactly what Marcus was planning and how far along his preparations had progressed. The goal wasn't to catch him in some dramatic confrontation that would make good television, but to understand the full scope of any potential threat so I could protect myself legally and financially while there was still time to act decisively. Whatever I discovered would determine whether I was dealing with a misunderstanding that could repair our trust or a betrayal so sophisticated that it would require me to defend everything I had worked for against the person who knew exactly how to destroy it most effectively. I was about to become a spy in my own home, investigating my own husband, using tactics that would have impressed the CIA. But when $500 million and 20 years of work are at stake, sentiment becomes a luxury. You can't afford, and love becomes a weakness that predators will exploit without mercy. My investigation began with the same methodical approach I used in hostile business environments. Start with what you can verify independently. Follow the paper trail like a forensic accountant, and trust data over emotions because numbers don't lie even when people do. I hired a private investigator, someone my attorney had recommended specifically for high-net-worth divorce cases involving complex asset hiding and financial deception, though I desperately hoped I'd never need those particular services. Within 48 hours, my worst fears were confirmed in ways that exceeded even my most paranoid suspicions. Marcus had been meeting with James Richardson, one of California's most ruthlessly aggressive divorce attorneys, known specifically for representing spouses of wealthy entrepreneurs and tech executives in cases that often involved financial destruction rather than fair settlement. The investigator provided photos that looked like surveillance footage from a spy thriller, meeting locations, and even credit card receipts from restaurants where Marcus had taken Richardson to lunch 3 times in the past month. Lunches that coincided with days he'd told me he was meeting potential clients. But the most damaging evidence was a parking receipt from Richardson's office building, time-stamped during a day when Marcus had told me he was visiting a potential client in the city. The receipt showed he had been there for over 3 hours, which meant this wasn't a casual consultation. It was a war planning session. The private investigator's report revealed details that made my blood run cold and confirmed that I was dealing with a level of calculated betrayal that bordered on sociopathic. Marcus had been researching California's community property laws extensively, focusing specifically on how courts evaluate tech companies and intellectual property during divorce proceedings. He had downloaded forms related to asset disclosure and had been building a comprehensive file of our financial documents, including bank statements, investment portfolios, and even internal company reports that I had shared with him during casual dinner conversations about work, thinking I was talking to my supportive husband rather than providing intelligence to an enemy operative. The investigator found evidence that Marcus had been systematically photographing documents in my home office, using his second phone, including partnership agreements and board meeting minutes that contained sensitive information about company valuation and future projections. This wasn't casual curiosity about our finances. This was systematic corporate espionage being conducted by someone with unlimited access to my most confidential information. He had been conducting intelligence operations in our own home, turning our bedroom conversations and intimate moments into data collection opportunities. Every time I had shared my business concerns or discussed strategic decisions, he had been mentally cataloging that information for use against me in legal proceedings designed to destroy everything I had built. The most shocking discovery was that Marcus had been consulting with a forensic accountant who specialized in uncovering hidden assets in high-net-worth divorces, someone who could make money disappear from legal documents or make it reappear depending on which side was paying their fees. This revelation hit me like a physical blow because it meant he suspected I was hiding money from him. Or worse, he was building a case to claim that I had been deliberately concealing assets during our marriage to reduce his potential settlement. The accountant had apparently advised him on how to document his contributions to my business success, including his emotional support during stressful periods, his role in entertaining clients and investors, and even his suggestions during strategic planning sessions that we'd had at home over wine and dinner. Marcus was systematically building a case that he deserved not just half of our shared assets, but a significant portion of my company based on his contributions to its success, contributions that I now realized had been performed with the calculated intention of establishing legal claims rather than genuine partnership. The man who had been my closest confidant was now treating our entire relationship as evidence in a legal case designed to destroy my financial future. And he had been building this case for months while sleeping next to me and accepting my trust like a professional con artist working a long-term mark. But the revelation that changed everything, the moment that transformed my heartbreak into cold rage, happened on a Friday evening when I came home early from a board meeting that had ended unexpectedly due to a sudden family emergency involving one of our investors. I entered through the side door, as I always did, moving quietly because I was exhausted and didn't want to disturb Marcus if he was working. But what I heard made me freeze in place, my heart pounding as I realized I was about to overhear something that would alter the trajectory of my life forever. "She has no idea what's coming," Marcus said, his voice carrying a tone I had never heard before in 12 years together, cold, calculated, almost gleeful in its anticipation of my destruction. "The prenup only covers assets up to the first $50 million, and everything after that falls under community property law. We're looking at a settlement worth at least $250 million, maybe more if we can prove my contributions to the business development and growth. Richardson thinks we might be able to claim up to 60% instead of the standard 50% if we play this right." I pressed myself against the wall outside his office, barely breathing as I listened to him continue with the enthusiasm of someone discussing a particularly profitable business deal. She trusts me completely with everything: passwords, accounts, business strategies, board meeting discussions, even her personal insecurities about the competition and market challenges. I've been documenting everything for months, and Richardson says we have one of the strongest cases he's ever seen for spousal contribution to business success. The forensic accountant found patterns in her spending and investment decisions that we can use to argue she was deliberately minimizing liquid assets to reduce any potential settlement. The person on the other end of the call, presumably his attorney, must have asked about timing because Marcus responded with military precision. "Next Friday. I'm going to serve her the papers next Friday morning at breakfast while she's relaxed and unsuspecting. She'll be completely blindsided, and Richardson says that's crucial because it prevents them from moving assets or restructuring before we can freeze everything. By the time she recovers from the emotional shock and hires her own attorney, we'll already have documented everything we need and filed preliminary injunctions to prevent any asset transfers." He paused, and I could hear him walking around his office, the sound of footsteps that had once been comforting, now sounding like the pacing of a predator planning an attack. The beautiful thing is that she's made this so easy by being completely transparent about everything. Most wealthy people are paranoid about sharing financial information, but she's given me access to everything because she actually believed we were partners building something together. Her trust is going to cost her everything she's worked for, and honestly, after putting up with her obsession with work for all these years, I've earned every dollar I'm going to take from her. As I listened to the man I had loved for 12 years discuss destroying my life with the casual efficiency of a corporate raid, something fundamental shifted inside me that went far beyond heartbreak or anger. The devastation was still there, sharp and immediate, but it was immediately joined by something much more powerful and dangerous: the cold, strategic fury that had driven me to build a business empire from nothing when everyone said I would fail. This was the same rage that had fueled me through 80-hour work weeks, hostile takeover attempts, and boardroom battles against men who thought they could intimidate or outmaneuver me. But this time, it wasn't just about business success. It was about survival, about protecting everything I had sacrificed and bled for against someone who had used my love as a weapon to destroy me. Marcus had made one critical miscalculation in his otherwise sophisticated planning, the same mistake that had destroyed countless predators who thought they understood their prey. He assumed that discovering his betrayal would leave me emotionally devastated and strategically paralyzed, unable to think clearly or act decisively while drowning in the pain of having my trust violated so completely. But he had forgotten who he was dealing with. He had forgotten that I had built my fortune by staying calm under pressure, by thinking 3 steps ahead of my competitors, and by acting swiftly and ruthlessly when opportunities or threats presented themselves. He had forgotten that I had survived and thrived in environments where showing weakness meant destruction, where emotional vulnerability was a luxury that could cost everything. Most importantly, he had given me the most valuable gift possible in any conflict: perfect intelligence about my enemy's plans, timeline, and strategy, combined with the element of surprise that he thought belonged to him. He had no idea that his carefully constructed advantage had just become my weapon, and his confidence in my emotional fragility was about to become the foundation of his complete destruction. I had 7 days to protect everything I had spent 20 years building, and I approached those 7 days like the most important hostile takeover defense of my life, except this time, the corporate raider was sleeping in my bed, and the stakes were everything I had ever worked for. That very night, while Marcus slept peacefully next to me, probably dreaming about his impending windfall, I was planning his financial annihilation with the cold precision that had made me $500 million. By 3 a.m., I had the framework of a strategy that would have impressed Sun Tzu. By 6 a.m. the next morning, I was sitting in the office of Elizabeth Chen, a brilliant attorney who specialized in protecting entrepreneurs and high-net-worth individuals in complex divorces involving sophisticated financial warfare. Elizabeth had a reputation for being ruthless in defense of her clients' assets and creative in finding legal strategies that opposing counsel never saw coming. I laid out everything I had discovered, every piece of intelligence I had gathered, and everything I suspected Marcus was planning to do. Elizabeth's response was immediate and decisive, spoken with the confidence of someone who had won battles like this before. "We can protect your assets, but we have to act fast, and we have to be smarter and more ruthless than his attorney. The good news is that you have something he doesn't know you have. Complete knowledge of his strategy and timeline, plus something even more valuable: the predatory instincts that built your empire in the first place." Working 18-hour days for the next week, Elizabeth and I restructured my entire financial life with the precision of a military operation and the creativity of a master chess player thinking 20 moves ahead. We moved my liquid assets into irrevocable trusts that were protected from divorce proceedings, transferred my company shares to a holding entity that predated my marriage, and relocated my investment portfolios to structures that Marcus had never been aware of and therefore couldn't claim as community property under any interpretation of California law. We used legal mechanisms that I had never heard of, but that Elizabeth wielded like surgical instruments designed specifically for financial protection. Domestic asset protection trusts that made my wealth legally untouchable, Delaware limited liability companies that created layers of separation between my assets and any potential claims, and Nevada dynasty trusts that would protect my wealth not just from this divorce, but from any future legal challenges for generations to come. Every move was perfectly legal, fully documented with paperwork that would stand up to any forensic accounting examination, and designed to ensure that the assets I had earned through my own work and brilliance remained under my complete control. We created a financial fortress that was impregnable to divorce proceedings while maintaining complete legal compliance with all state and federal regulations. But we didn't stop at defense. Elizabeth suggested something that made my predatory instincts sing with satisfaction. "Since he's been conducting financial reconnaissance on you, it's only fair that we return the favor. Let's find out exactly what assets he's been hiding and what his real financial situation looks like. I have a feeling your husband isn't as financially transparent as he pretends to be." The investigation into Marcus's finances revealed layers of deception that made his betrayal even more calculating. He had been building his own asset protection strategies for over a year, moving money into accounts I didn't know existed, and even establishing business partnerships that were designed to hide income and assets from any potential divorce proceedings. The man who had accused me of hiding assets was conducting his own financial shell game while living in my house and spending my money. The morning Marcus planned to serve me with divorce papers and destroy my life, I was ready for war. I woke up at my usual 5 a.m., reviewed the final legal documents Elizabeth had prepared, and went through my normal routine as if nothing had changed, but with the cold satisfaction of a general who knows the enemy is walking into a perfectly prepared trap. When Marcus came down to the kitchen at 7:30, carrying a manila envelope and wearing the nervous smile I now recognized as his pre-betrayal expression, I was calmly eating my breakfast and reading Market reports on my tablet, playing the role of the unsuspecting victim he expected to destroy. "Sarah, we need to talk," he said, setting the envelope on the table between us with the careful ceremony of someone who had rehearsed this moment. "I know this will come as a shock, but I think we should get a divorce. I've had some time to think about our future, and I believe we'd both be happier apart." I looked up from my tablet, smiled warmly with the same expression I used in boardroom negotiations when I was about to destroy a competitor, and said, "That's interesting timing, Marcus, because I have something for you, too." I handed him a folder containing copies of all the legal documents we had filed. showing the new structure of my assets and the forensic accounting that proved every dollar had been earned through my own efforts and business acumen, completely separate from any community property claims. As he read through page after page of legal protections that made his carefully planned settlement impossible, his face went from confident to confused to completely pale, and I watched 12 years of deception crumble in real time. The trust funds were irrevocable and established before our marriage in jurisdictions that didn't recognize California community property law. The business holdings were structured through entities that had no connection to our marital assets. The investment portfolios had been moved to trusts that would benefit our future children we would never have together, making them completely untouchable by divorce proceedings. "The fortune you were planning to claim half of," I said with the calm satisfaction of a predator who has just delivered a killing blow, "no longer exists in any form that divorce proceedings can touch. But don't worry about being left with nothing. You'll get exactly what you deserve from our marriage, your own pre-marriage assets, which according to my forensic accountant amount to about $12,000. And a 2018 Honda Civic with an outstanding loan balance." The look of complete devastation on his face as he realized that months of planning and legal strategy had been not just defeated but completely obliterated was more satisfying than any business victory I had ever achieved. But I wasn't finished destroying him. "Oh, and Marcus," I continued, my voice carrying the cold edge that had intimidated Fortune 500 executives, "my attorney found your hidden accounts, your secret business, partnerships, and the assets you've been concealing from me for over a year. Since you've been planning this divorce for so long, I'm sure you won't mind that I've already filed for fraud charges related to your concealment of marital assets. Turns out that hiding money from your spouse while planning to claim half of theirs is not just morally bankrupt, it's actually illegal." The transformation in his demeanor was complete and immediate. The confident predator who had been planning my financial destruction was now a cornered animal who realized he had been outmaneuvered by someone who played the game at a level he never understood. "Sarah, we can work this out," he said, his voice breaking with the desperation of someone who has just watched their master plan collapse. "This doesn't have to be ugly. We can negotiate something reasonable." I stood up from the table, straightened my jacket, and looked down at the man who had spent a year planning to destroy everything I had worked for, with the same expression I used when firing executives who had betrayed the company. "Marcus, there is nothing to negotiate. You declared war on me the moment you decided to steal what I built instead of building something yourself. The difference between us is that when someone declares war on me, I don't just win. I make sure they never have the resources or opportunity to try again." As I walked toward the door to leave for what would be my most satisfying day at the office in 20 years, I turned back one final time to deliver the coup de grace that would ensure Marcus never forgot the cost of underestimating me. "By the way, the prenup you thought was your golden ticket? My attorney found a clause that voids the entire agreement if either party commits fraud during the marriage. Hiding assets qualifies as fraud, Marcus. So now you don't get half of anything. You get exactly what you brought into this marriage, minus legal fees, minus fraud penalties, and minus the expensive lesson. That you should never try to destroy someone who built an empire by destroying people who underestimated her." The last thing I heard as I closed the door was the sound of Marcus collapsing into a chair, probably realizing that his attempt to steal my fortune had cost him everything he actually had and left him with nothing but the knowledge that he had been completely outplayed by the woman he thought was too trusting to protect herself. 6 months later, I'm sitting in my new penthouse, having just closed the biggest acquisition in my company's history, and I can honestly say that discovering Marcus's betrayal was the best thing that ever happened to me. Not because I enjoyed the pain or the destruction of my marriage, but because it taught me that trust without verification isn't love, it's negligence. It forced me to develop security systems and asset protection strategies that have made me not just wealthier, but completely untouchable to any future threats, personal or professional. The lesson here isn't just about marriage or relationships. It's about power, protection, and the cold reality that the people closest to you often have the most opportunity to destroy you if you give them the access and trust that predators crave. Whether it's business partners, family members, or romantic relationships, the same principles apply. Verify everything, protect your assets like your life depends on it, and never assume that love or loyalty will prevent someone from taking everything you've worked for if the opportunity and motivation align. If you're watching this and you recognize any of the warning signs I missed, don't wait for confirmation of your worst fears. Start protecting yourself immediately. Trust your instincts, hire professionals who specialize in asset protection, and remember that the cost of paranoia is always less than the cost of naivety when significant wealth is involved. And if you're planning to betray someone who trusted you, remember this story and ask yourself one question. Are you absolutely certain that the person you're planning to destroy isn't 3 steps ahead of you, waiting for you to make the move that will justify their complete annihilation of everything you thought you could steal? Subscribe for more stories from the dark side of wealth and power. Because in a world where money makes the rules, the only protection you have is knowing how the game is really played. And trust me, it's played much more ruthlessly than you think.